It's 2 a.m. The house is all quiet, but you're not sleeping. You're standing over your baby, one hand hovering just above their chest, asking yourself the same question for the 10th time. Are they too hot? Are they too cold? Should I add a layer? Should I take a layer away? As soon as the weather warms up, something shifts for us as parents, and the rules that you thought you understood around safer sleep suddenly feel a bit unclear.
A baby who is slightly cooler will probably sleep better than a baby who is slightly warmer.
Advice online is conflicting, and that fear around sleep becomes really, really real. Because here's the truth, overheating for little babies isn't just uncomfortable, it's one of the most overlooked risks when it comes to safer sleep. And yet so many of us are left guessing in the dark, literally in the dark.
Having a in-room thermometer like a grow egg or something similar, that can be a really good indication. I know quite a lot of baby monitors these days also have the temperature on there.
So in this episode, we're cutting through the noise, and I am joined by sleep consultant and mum of 4, Tori Drew, known on social media as thisparentcan_sleep. We're talking about what actually matters when it comes to babies and safer sleep, what's myth, what's evidence-based, and what could make all the difference. Because safer sleep should not feel like a guessing game. So welcome, Tori, and thank you so much for joining us on this episode, because as parents, I feel like parenting in general is ever changing, but things like temperature just feel like make that feel so much more highlighted, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for inviting me on and for talking about such an important topic, because as you say, it is a minefield, and especially as, fingers crossed, we start to creep into some warmer weather, it's so difficult to know what to do, how to approach it, what's the best thing to do, should the blinds be open, should they be shut, and so on and so on. So yeah, it's a really important topic. So thank you so much for inviting me.
I'm so pleased. And I'm going to try not to sabotage this whole conversation, Tori, and just talk about all of my sleep questions and needs. But, I'm sure in your experience, there are some kind of main things that tend to crop up. And I'd love to know, what's the biggest kind of sleep misconception that you see parents struggle most with?
So in terms of temperature and sleep kind of misconception, I think it's almost kind of ingrained in us as parents that babies must be kept really, really warm to sleep well. But actually, as humans, so from babies, all the way up to adulthood, we tend to sleep better in slightly cooler environments. So that's why we actually find it really difficult to sleep when it's a heat wave, because it's just, you're just uncomfortable. So a baby who is slightly cooler will probably sleep better than a baby who is slightly warmer. And also, I think it's important to understand that a baby who is slightly cooler will indicate to us if they're a bit too cold, but a baby who is too warm might actually struggle to indicate that they're too warm, because sometimes it can sort of stop their sleep cues from coming through.
That's so interesting. And I think historically, especially when we have maybe like grandparents supporting us or being involved in baby care, they are definitely guilty, or certainly in my parenting experience, of thinking like, oh, wrap that baby up. Oh, they're a bit cold. Oh, do they
Where are
need
their
to
socks? Where are their socks? Yeah.
socks and mittens? And like, how many hats and socks and mittens do you end up with a newborn baby? And I'm like, they don't wear them.
No.
What are we doing with all these socks
Yeah,
and mittens?
yeah.
So funny. And as you said, like when we're too hot, we know that we know that we're too hot, and we're like trying to get comfy and wriggling around and things. When the weather does get warmer, many parents will instinctively kind of start taking layers perhaps off their baby, or adding layers on when it's cooler. But how can we actually, as parents, know if a baby is too hot or too cold during sleep? Because like you say, they can't tell us in the same way that we can tell ourselves.
No, and that's a really, really good question, because I think what we tend to do, especially if they are asleep, we don't want to start kind of, taking layers off, shoving our hands here, there and everywhere. So as parents, we tend to feel their hands and feel their feet. But these are slightly cooler, so they're not a good indication of actually what's going on in their sort of main system. So the things that I would be checking are kind of their chest or the back of their neck, because that will give a clear kind of indication of where their body temperature is at. So what we want that areas to feel is slightly warm. We don't want it to be hot. We don't want it to feel sort of sweaty or clammy. If they do feel kind of sweaty or clammy, or like hot to the touch, then that can be an indication that actually they are a little bit too warm, so it might be worth removing a layer. Also, another indication is if they look really flushed in their face, like, you know, when our babies are poorly and they get a temperature, they kind of have that flushed look. They can look like that if they are overheating, a little bit too hot. So ignore the kind of hands and feet, because they are generally slightly cooler anyway. So go for, as I said, the chest or the kind of back of the neck.
The back of the neck is always my go-to, because it
Yeah.
feels quite accessible, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, you can quite easily slip a hand round there without overly, you know, stimulating them and waking them up, because like, definitely have fear of touching a baby.
Yeah. Please take my cup.
Absolutely. Now, one of the things I think there is so much confusion around is TOG ratings of like sleeping bags and blankets, and sometimes even like sleepwear, room temperatures, clothing, what combination of those things we need. Tori, what is the simplest way that parents can confidently dress their baby for sleep, particularly in these warmer months that are coming?
It is a minefield, isn't it? And there's so much advice. And what I always say to my clients is, whatever brand that you are using, they usually have like a temperature guide, like a clothing guide to go with them. Just follow that, because they all seem to sort of alter a little bit between brands. So yeah, I would look at the kind of brand guidelines and go with that. Having a in-room thermometer, like a grow egg or something similar, that can be a really good indication. I know quite a lot of baby monitors these days also have the temperature on there, but a kind of a general rule of thumb is anything sort of 24 degrees or above, a nappy and like a 0.5 sleeping bag. Between 21 to 23 degrees, a vest, a short sleeve vest, and kind of a one tog sleeping bag. And then between sort of 16 to 20 degrees, which is kind of the optimal temperature that we want the baby's room to be, is sort of a 2.5 sleeping bag, and then like a normal kind of what I call a sleep suit pajama set. So just like the normal kind of sleep suit that a baby would sleep in. But as I said, have a look at what your brand recommends, but also have a look at the Lullaby Trust website. That's kind of like the sort of go-to for all things sort of safe sleep, and also the NHS have really good advice as well. So yeah, I would, but my main sort of point is to have a little look at the brand that you're using, because as I said, they're all slightly different, and that will give a good indication of what we kind of should be aiming for.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you mentioned there, Tori, those like half tog sleep bags that just give, sometimes my boys in particular really associated like a sleeping bag with sleep.
Yeah.
So the idea in the warmer months of not having something on them, I was like, they're not going to know it's sleep
Yeah.
time. Like, this is literally part of their routine. And actually, those really light bags allow you to keep that as part of their sleep routine, allow you to know they've got that extra layer. But it's a really nice kind of hybrid, isn't it? So they're definitely something to keep an eye out for in these kind of warmer months, because they can work so nicely, and definitely those nice breathable materials to keep babies comfortable. And like we said, that key room temperature of 16 to 20 degrees is great in an ideal world, but it can be near impossible, if not entirely impossible, to monitor and keep that, like, you know, rigid temperature control in those really hot months. So it's nice to know that actually know what the temperature is and adjust the clothing, rather than thinking the clothing has to stay the same and I've got to
somehow I've got to cool the room down. Yeah, absolutely. And also it's worth noting that if you use a blanket rather than a sleeping bag, one fold doubles as a tog, if that makes sense. So if you're doubling up, so you're kind of putting it over, then that sort of adds a tog. So that's, if you're using a blanket rather than a sleeping bag, that is something to think about. But as you say, having in the really warm months, sometimes just putting a zero 0.5 really thin sort of muslin material, because if you put them down in just a nappy, sometimes like we get a bit chilly kind of in the middle of the night, even if it is like 38 degrees outside. It's just having that little bit of comfort and
Comfort, isn't
yeah.
it? It's always trying to get that balance between comfort and safety, because at the end of the day, we all want to promote our babies to sleep well.
Exactly.
That's
Exactly.
mostly the goal.
Yes.
And obviously, as part of that, we do want to think about how we can try to monitor and keep the room as cool as we possibly can. Things like opening windows, using fans. What are some of the like safest ways or helpful tips that you recommend to families in terms of trying to keep that room cool but also safe?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, this is where I think the biggest sort of questions come up, because we don't know what to do. Is a fan safe? Is it not? Should we have the windows open? Should we not? So what I tend to suggest is prep the day. So don't have all the windows and the blinds open and things. If we can, let's keep those curtains and blinds shut so the sunlight isn't coming into the room and it's not heating the room up. Fans, absolutely safe to use, but we just don't want them pointing directly at baby. We want them kind of oscillating sort of around them. Having windows open is absolutely fine, and it's quite nice actually to get that bit of airflow. What I often do with mine when it's super hot, and it's not for everyone, but once the sun has gone down and it's nice and dark, I go in and I open the curtains, blinds, and open the windows, because they're not going to get any light in to wake them up, but they are just getting that sort of circulation and a bit of ventilation of air. And then I do set my alarm sort of before the sun sort of starts to wake up, and then go and close them up and put the fan back on. So if you wanted to do that, that's absolutely an option. You just want to avoid babies being directly kind of under the window if you're going to have the window open, because it can become very, very drafty. But yeah, and also, you know, if we're thinking about kind of cooler months, having their cot kind of directly against a radiator as well, because that we know that can kind of cause overheating. So yeah, that's kind of what I would do. Definitely use a fan if you wanted to use a fan. Just make sure it's oscillating, not directly on straight onto them. If you have a window open, great, just make sure that their cot's not directly under the window, and keep the blinds down during the day so the room doesn't heat up. And as you say, there's only so much that we can do, so focus more on the stuff that we can control, like what they're wearing, rather than what we can't control, temperature of the room.
Yeah, that's such a good tip, that nighttime thing, Tori, because actually there's even if you didn't want to do the level of commitment that you do with setting the alarm to close it all back up again, there's often, like, even if it's like a 90-minute, 2-hour window between little ones going to sleep and the sun having set and you going to sleep. So I'm definitely gonna, I've not even thought of that, but that simple thing of actually, before I go to bed, let's just aerate their room a little bit, sounds like an amazing idea, just to, like you say, get that bit of cool down when it's
Yeah,
at that like peak heat.
yeah,
Is such a good tip. And I always find like a really nice cool bath before bedtime, like they're typically so hot and
yeah,
sweaty come the evening. I've definitely, with mine, they're a little bit older now, so they're on solid foods, but very much like do the main meal at lunchtime before they get too over hot and
yeah,
overstimulated and can't be bothered to eat anything, and then like snacky dinner, nice cool bath, so
yeah,
that everyone's hopefully that little bit more comfortable and less
yeah,
irritable.
yeah.
And I think for mums that are milk feeding their baby still, particularly breastfeeding mums, being at peace or prepared for the fact that they may well ramp up their feeds
Absolutely, yeah,
around the heat is a really good one, because that can be, you're hot and sticky, then suddenly you've got a baby that wants to feed all the time and you're like, what's going on?
yeah, yeah,
That's
absolutely.
their way of hydrating, isn't it? So
Yeah,
important to
yeah,
follow that.
definitely. And also just keep it like the usual things, keep an eye on urine output and things like that, because again, we want to make sure that they are well hydrated, and just think that we drink more when we're hot and sweaty, and they're exactly the same. And also if you wanted to try and keep a little bit of, not distance, that's not the right word, but if you're finding it really hot to have them on you, then put a little muzzy on you, and they can sort of be comforted by that, because again, like, you know, I know that we regulate their body temperature, but sometimes it can feel quite sort of like overwhelming for us. Like you're just like, oh, can't breathe. Like I'm so hot, and I've got another human kind of here.
Yeah.
Just having that muslin can actually, really help.
Definitely. Oh my gosh, I remember that. I remember just being like, this just feels like we're all very sweaty.
Yes.
Like, are you sure you want to be on me?
Yeah. Yeah. Are you sure?
It feels like a lot, for sure.
Yeah.
Just a quick pause for anybody wondering how to navigate baby sleep during the warmer months. Trying to keep your baby comfortable and cool can feel like a conflicting balance. Not knowing how to adjust layers, keep them cozy, but also prevent overheating, which is so important for safer sleep. This is why I really love Mollis & Co. new 0.5 TOG summer sleep bag range, where quality and comfort meet safety. They are fully breathable whilst not compromising on softness or design. Sleep bags can give you peace of mind that you're setting your little one up for the safest and most cozy night's sleep. And the new Mollis & Co. 0.5 TOG sleeping bags are the perfect safe and comfortable addition to sleep for your baby in the warmer months. Summer is coming, and it's time to get our sleep setup ready. I've linked to the sleeping bags I recommend in the episode description, so check those out to remove the guesswork and make your life a little easier. And use the discount code midwifepip_5 for your exclusive discount too. We talk about temperature regulation for babies, and we know that's so important as part of the key underlying principles for safer sleep. We know that no new or expectant parent wants to think about SIDS, which is sudden infant death syndrome. But the reason we highlight and talk so much about temperature regulation is because we know that overheating is one of those leading but really preventable causes of SIDS in newborn babies. So as we move into those warmer months, these principles, having these in the back of your mind, planning for how you're going to dress your baby and regulate that temperature is super important. But one of those other things that crops up all the time, I think, Tori, when we talk about trying to promote safer sleep or reduce the risk of SIDS, is this term safe sleep space. And I think it's really important we just go through with parents what that actually is, because it can be a bit like, oh yeah, safe sleep space, but everyone's thinking, what really is that? What ticks the boxes of a safe sleep space for babies? Would you mind just explaining to parents listening kind of what that actually is and what they need to make sure they're doing for every sleep, right? Day and night.
Yeah.
Have that space.
Yeah. So a golden rule, which I like to use, is clear, flat, and on their back. So they're in a clear cot. They haven't got any toys. They haven't got any bumpers, anything like that. Their cot is like a clean, clear space. We obviously want them to be on a flat surface. So you don't want to be using kind of like an old mattress with loads of bumps and things in it. It wants to be, a very flat kind of safe mattress. You want to ensure that there's no loose bedding or anything that they can kind of pull onto their faces. And you want them to be put down to sleep for every sleep on their back. Also in the feet to foot position. So that means that their feet are touching the bottom of the crib, cot, whatever it is. So basically if you're using a blanket, you can tuck it in and they can't, wriggle anywhere. So yeah, that's what I would be sort of thinking about, is a clear, flat, and on their back. I know that a lot of parents, when they say, oh, my baby can roll now, so I'm going to put them down on their tummies and things like that. No, put them down on their back, and once they can roll independently both ways, so from back to front and front to back, then you will find that they get themselves into some weird and wonderful positions. But if we start every sleep with them on their back in that feet to foot position in a clear cot on a flat surface, a flat mattress, then we are kind of sticking to those golden rules.
I love that. Yeah, that's a really nice way of simplifying it, because I think it can get a bit confusing.
Yeah.
There's so many brilliant sleep products out there on the market, but there are some that aren't safe. So that's why it's super important that we make sure that what we're looking at is, safety first. And then, if you're not sure, then always feel free to contact that manufacturer or speak to the Lullaby Trust, have a look on their website, because it's really important that you have something that is safe. And that's one of the reasons, Tori, that I've always loved a sleeping bag, because I just feel like if you've got the right tog for the temperature and the right size and fit for your baby's age or weight, you naturally tick that safe sleep box, and you haven't got to worry about blankets that might have moved, or
Yes.
have they moved and now it's wrapped over and now they're warmer, or have they wriggled under it, and that it just takes that kind of
Yeah.
anxiety away. So I've always been a really big fan of them, to be honest.
Yeah, so it's absolutely same here. They just, as you say, just take the kind of questions and worry out of it, and you just know where you're at. You know what kind of tog they're in. You know that it's safe and secure for their weight and their age, and yeah, it just makes things a little bit easier to navigate.
We're always up for anything that
Yeah.
makes things a little bit easier.
Yeah.
If there was one major myth that you wish you could bust for parents around safer sleep, what would it be, Tori?
So I think I touched on it earlier, and it's, I hear a lot like, my baby will wake if they're too hot, and sometimes actually it can be the opposite, because being too hot can reduce their ability to wake. So don't feel like you need to add that extra layer, or you need to, put a hat on them or anything like that. As I said at the beginning, it's better for a baby to be a little bit on the cooler side than a little bit on the sort of hotter side. And I think also it, as you say, parenting comes with so much guidance and so much advice. And when it comes to safe sleep, we're not aiming for perfection. It's about reducing the risks, and overheating is one of those preventable risks that we have control over. Yes, we don't have control over the temperature of the room, but we do have control over the layers and what we're putting our baby in to sleep, and their sleep environment. So kind of ticking all those boxes is, I just like a really good way to kind of prevent anything like overheating SIDS and things like that.
Yeah, definitely. And I think when we zoom out and we're like, actually, that baby waking up is a positive sign. It's much easier for us to address them being a bit too cool than miss them overheating. And I often say to families, particularly with newborns, that it's really important that they wake regularly overnight. That's what helps prevent SIDS. It's their like natural biological mechanism, isn't it? So that they don't go into too much of a deep sleep. Because that's where they can then have trouble coming into those lighter sleep. So we want them to be able to cycle and not go into those really, really deep sleeps. So not allowing them to overheat and allowing them to wake up when they need to is actually really important. When you're in the depths of sleep deprivation, it can be tempting, can't it, to
Yeah,
think, well, keep them nice
absolutely.
and
Yeah.
warm so they're nice and cold. But if we kind of just zoom out for a minute and recognize, the priorities, safety is always it, right?
Exactly. And I think also understanding that that's the reason why the guidance is to having babies in the same room as a caregiver for the first 6 months, because it keeps us, our presence, one of the reasons is to keep them from falling into a really, really deep sleep. So again, that's why they say it reduces the risk of SIDS, because our presence with them in the room for the first 6 months kind of keeps them in that kind of lighter sleep stage. And again, you just remember, it's not permanent. Like, this is not going to be forever. The sleep deprivation, the frequent night wakes is not going to last forever. And the ladies that we speak to on YPJ, we always say to them, it's not permanent. Like, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. We've just got to get through these, couple of months, and then things will start to shift. So I think, again, that's really important to remember.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you're so right. It feels like that old phrase that everyone says, Tori, and that the days feel long but the years are short, is so true. But it's hard to feel that when you're in those days.
Yeah.
But then you look back and you're like, my eldest starts school this year, and I'm like, where's it gone? I miss those nighttime cuddles. In the moment, I did not. Like,
Yeah.
I
Oh, yeah,
wanted to
absolutely.
go to sleep.
Yeah.
But now I'm like, oh my gosh, like it really does go past. But like you say, safety has to always be first, and it can feel really confusing,
Yeah.
which is why we were so keen to jump on and break down some of those myths and give parents some clarity ahead of what is hopefully going to be some warmer weather on its way. So thank you so much, Tori. You're an absolute star. If anyone has got any questions around sleep, safer sleep, dressing your baby for sleep, then do reach out. Tori's details are all in the description as well. But thank you so much, Tori.
Thank you so much for having me, Pip.